What is the real estate market like now that these changes from the NAR lawsuit are starting to come into effect? Now, August 17th is when the entire country needs to make these changes. But here in Vermont, we implemented these changes back on July 15th. So I have about 2 weeks of experience under this new system, which is no buyer's agent commission is offered through MLS. It's still being offered, but just not through MLS. And you have to sign a buyer representation agreement before showing a single property to a buyer. So those are the two major changes that took place as a result of this NAR lawsuit. We're going to talk about my experience working under this new system, and we're going to go over an article about a buyer down in Texas who's really struggling under this new system. Now, I wanted to quickly debunk 3 myths about this new lawsuit and the changes that are taking place. The first is that just because you have a buyer's agent, you're going to have to pay your buyer's agent out of pocket. This is not necessarily the case. Sellers can still offer buyer's agent commissions. Many sellers still are choosing to do so, even though it's not public through MLS. They're still offering buyer's agent commission. So that's one way that your buyer's agent could get paid. And even if the seller isn't offering a buyer's agent commission, you can still submit an offer that includes that buyer's agent commission in the purchase price. In other words, if you're making an offer on a home for $500,000, you can say, we're offering $500,000 with 2.5% of the closing cost, or 2% of the closing of the purchase price, 2.5%, 3%, whatever your buyer's agent commission may be. You can ask for that back with the offer you're submitting, even if the seller isn't offering any commission. So you don't necessarily need to pay for it out of pocket. There's ways to get around that. The second is that sellers are no longer offering buyer's agent commission. That's the second myth. That's just simply not true. Many sellers are still offering buyer's agent commissions when they list their home. I know I'm advising my sellers to still offer it because that's the best way to get your property sold. If you're competing against two similar listings, one is offering a buyer's agent commission, one is not. The buyers who are out there are going to go to the home that is offering that buyer's agent commission. So it gives you a competitive advantage in the market, and it will put you at a disadvantage if you aren't offering that commission. Now, with my recent listings, even with these changes, my recent listings the past few months, all of the showings have been with buyer's agents. So they have not gone directly to me. I'm not seeing an increase in direct calls on my listings because of this new settlement change. Now, the third myth is whatever you're offering to the buyer broker, whatever buyer broker commission you are offering is the buyer broker commission that you will have to pay. While this may be true, right? If you're offering a 3% buyer agent commission to the agent who brings the buyer for your home, you might have to pay that 3%. But what dictates whether or not you'll need to pay that 3% is the type of commission that is agreed upon, or the type of payment that's agreed upon between the buyer and their agent. In other words, if the buyer's buyer representation agreement, they've only agreed upon a 2% commission, then that buyer's agent cannot accept the 3% commission that you are offering as a seller. They must accept only a 2% commission out of that 3%. And then that extra 1% would, for my listings, would go back to you as the seller unless it was otherwise specified in the contract. So just because you're offering, if you're a seller out there and you're offering a buyer's agent commission, it doesn't mean that's necessarily what you're going to have to pay. What the buyer's agent gets paid is agreed upon prior to the showing between the buyer's agent and the purchaser. And so offering that fee gets the buyer into the home. But if the buyer's agent has agreed to work for a 2% fee or a 1.5% fee or a $1,500 fee, then you might not need to pay that full 2.5% commission out of your seller's proceeds to the buyer's agent. So those are 3 quick myths that I find many people are still not understanding with these new changes coming into effect. Now, let's get right into this article here. Before we do, my name is Liam O'Reilly. I'm a realtor here in Vermont with Jerry Riley Real Estate. If you have any real estate needs, all my contact information is in the description. Reach out to me directly. I would be happy to help you. So this article here out of Texas talks about a home buyer in Dallas who is looking to purchase a home and is really struggling to grasp the new changes that are taking place. And it's tough for them. So basically, he's struggling to find a buyer's agent where because a lot of these agents are demanding up to $2,500 or $25,000 in fees for the buyer's agent, something that he never had to deal with in buying his first house. One agent even wanted him to sign a contract committing to a 3% commission. That's how buyer representation agreements worked in Vermont. That's how they've worked here in Vermont for years, is you sign a buyer representation agreement and you agree upon the commission before you even see the property. Now, committing to that 3% commission, it doesn't necessarily mean, as I talked about at the beginning of this video, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will pay that 3% commission out of pocket at closing. There's ways to negotiate it if the seller isn't offering that 3% commission and the seller might already be offering that commission. Now, what you should ask your agent to do if you're going to sign a buyer representation agreement because you want to see a property, you can ask to sign a one-time buyer representation agreement, especially if this is your first showing. This is something that I do personally in my business, is when somebody calls in, they want to see a property, I'll say, great, we need to sign up on a buyer representation agreement. We can do it just for this property. It won't apply to any other properties. And let me call the listing agent to see if they're offering any buyer's agent commission. Then I'll call the listing agent. Oftentimes, the seller will be offering a buyer's agent commission. If so, then I'll say, look, my fee is this. The seller is offering this, and have that conversation with the buyer up front. If they're not offering a buyer's agent commission, I'll talk about what I'm saying in this video right now is that there's different ways that you can pay for that buyer's agent commission. Yes, one of those ways is paying out of pocket closing. The other ways are working it into the purchase price, where we offer the purchase price minus the commission that I am agreeing to work for you as your buyer's agent. The third is some sort of split between the buyer and seller, where maybe you pay a portion out of pocket and the seller includes or agrees to pay some of that out of their closing proceeds. So there's different ways to structure this commission, and this is something that really wasn't discussed in this article. Now they talk about here how he said the answer I got was yes, it's fully negotiable, but our standard rate is 3%. You say it's fully negotiable, but it seems like you're only willing to negotiate up. Now, what does it mean to be fully negotiable, right? Technically, any home on the market, when they list their price, you don't have to offer list price. You can offer above list price, you can offer below list price. That list price is fully negotiable. It's whatever the seller is willing to take and whatever the buyer is willing to pay for it. Now, with the buyer's agent commission, sure, it's fully negotiable, but it's going to be only what that buyer's agent is willing to work for the duties that they're providing you. Now, some people might think that realtors are overpaid, and there's plenty that are. Let's just be frank about that. There's plenty that are not great realtors who are out there not doing good work for people and still taking that 3%, 2.5%, 2% commission, which can be a lot of money. But if you have a realtor who does good work, who represents your needs, who advises you through this purchase, it's something that is really invaluable. And that 2.5% fee, while it can be a substantial amount of money, or that 3% fee, whatever the fee may be, well, I'm just using this as an example. It it can be a substantial amount of money, but it's worth it if you have an agent who's going to guide you through the difficulties of a home purchase. You never know what you're going to encounter. For example, I just had a home close recently in July that we ran into some title issues. The title issues were pretty big. There were some septic issues. There was a pond that wasn't permitted on the property. They had a farm that wasn't permitted. There was a lot going on, but the listing agent came out and basically said, look, this is all the issues that we have. And he threw his hands up and said, look, I don't know how we're going to get this closed. I think it's best that your buyers just terminate and walk away. The seller side essentially gave up on the transaction. My buyers, they really wanted this property. So I did the work of getting things arranged, figuring out how long it would take to get these issues closed, and really just solving the problem, getting my buyers into this property. Now, if they didn't have a buyer's agent, if they went directly to the listing agent, that deal would have fallen through. They never would have purchased this property. They wouldn't have been able to negotiate a better price for themselves on this home. It would have just fallen apart. So if you have a good buyer's agent, they can be invaluable for your purchase. Now, let's go back through this article here. Now, right at the bottom here, he talks about how he wants to use a buyer's agent. This this home buyer says here, I'm attempting to make the largest purchase I ever have in my life. I just don't want to mess it up. So I feel like a real estate agent would be able to walk me through it to make sure I don't screw myself out of $700,000. And a lot of buyers feel that way. And there's good reason to have a buyer's agent in this market when purchasing a property today. You don't want to mess something up. If you really want a property, you want somebody who's problem solving, who's a good negotiator, who will be able to negotiate the contract, and get you more favorable terms, or help you structure it in a way so you get to close it. right? You don't want to mess up this large purchase, potentially the largest purchase of your life, because you have only done this a handful of times or you haven't done it at all, and you're not familiar with the steps needed to purchase the home. That is really the value of the buyer's agent. Now, what am I seeing in Vermont as a result of this lawsuit? So far, there's most of the listings, most sellers are choosing to offer that buyer's agent commission for reasons that I mentioned earlier in this video. If there's two comparable properties, one is offering a buyer's agent commission, one isn't, then most buyers who are working with a buyer's agent, which is most buyers in the market, they're going to choose to go to that listing that is offering that buyer's agent commission. So overall, the main thing that's changed is that there's more upfront explaining to purchasers, talking about the buyer representation agreement, talking about the changes, talking about the commission, and negotiating the commission. Of course, it's fully negotiable, but just like a home price is negotiable, it's whatever that agent is willing to take for their services. Same thing with the seller. The home price is negotiable, but it's whatever the seller is willing to take for their home. They might not want to take an offer that's 20% under list price. Well, it's fully negotiable. Why won't they take my offer that's 20% under? Because that's not the price that they want. Same thing with agents. If an agent doesn't want to work for a lower price, they don't have to. And you don't have to hire that agent. You can hire a discount agent. From my experience, you get what you pay for. You don't have to go to a nice restaurant and eat a nice meal. You can go to McDonald's. It's the same thing in the real estate industry as well. So overall, many sellers are still offering buyer's agent commissions. I think it's the best way to market your property because agents are calling other agents to find out what the commission is. You have to have that upfront conversation before you're showing, or at least most agents are. And so even though it's not publicly available, commission is being talked about now more than ever. And then there's just more explaining to get these buyer representation agreements signed prior to the first showing. Personally, it hasn't been anything that I've really struggled with so far. Most of the buyers that I'm working with understand the commission structure, they understand the settlement, and they understand that this is just the way the market's going. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave me a comment. What changes are you seeing in your local market? Is there anything in this video I missed? I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.